Thomas merchandise. It's expensive. Thomas merchandise has always been an interesting topic for me. While DVDs are where my heart lies, I can't help but always draw my eyes to the newest piece of Thomas merch, even if it looks like actual dog shit. And my favourite thing about Thomas merch is that there's just so many different brands making it. Wooden Railway, Take Along, Play-Rail, Bandai, Ertl, this literal Hellspawn. There's so much variety in Thomas merchandise and I love it. So today we're going to be ranking every mainline Thomas toy line from worst to best. And for context, here are all of the companies I'm going to be taking into consideration. I'm also going to be merging companies like Tomy, Trackmaster and Play-Rail together because while yes they are separate from each other, they're also kind of the same as their designs are literally the same. Let's get started. Coming in at dead last, no competition, is Thomas Wood V1. It honestly astounds me that this was allowed to be sold on store shelves in 2018. These things look like literal unfinished prototypes. They straight up just printed the decals onto solid pieces of wood and called it a day. Like, how do you go from this to this in less than a year? I get it, budget cuts, but fucking hell, this was insulting. Absolutely abysmal. 2018 was a low point for the Thomas brand and it's clear to see why. Next up is Trackmaster Push Along, which is also from 2018, I think. Again, how do you go from okay to literal fecal matter this quickly? I think we can all agree that getting rid of the magnet system was a bad move, not only for compatibility but overall quality. Now the Adventurous hook system was truthfully not awful. In some ways it was actually better than the magnets, as a lot of the time if you were to pull a long line of trucks with take-alongs, it simply wouldn't work because the magnets weren't strong enough, so having a tight clip system kinda works. But this? Just so you can make both equally terrible Trackmasters compatible? From a perspective of consistency and accuracy, why would you even want to do that? Why hook up a small Percy to a big Thomas? That'll just look jarring. And it's because of Mattel trying to make these two compatible by not only changing the couplings but also widening them to fit on Trackmaster track, that they were all made much wider. Not only the sculpts themselves, but the wheels were greatly extended too, making them look absolutely disgusting. They also decided to squish the tenders even more, like, huh? This line is just laughable. I'll admit there were a couple of cool concepts here and there. That Black James would have been cool if it was an Adventures model, and while yes the things I'm about to show aren't necessarily part of the line, and as much as I despise All Engines Go, I'll admit that the diecast engines they're making are very accurate to the show, which I can kind of appreciate. That's the only positive thing you're going to hear me say about All Engines Go. Now we have, I genuinely don't know how you can make such ugly models and release them to the public. Like, bro, like, who the fuck's gonna buy that? The only thing I will give this company is that their original James and Thomas, and only original James and Thomas, not these fucking things. Their original James and Thomas are quite cool and give me season 2 vibes, but that is it. Next up is a bit of an obscure one, Mega Bloks. Now, I'll say this, the original ones they made back in the early 2010s aren't actually bad per se, I just don't like how they look personally. And I'm also bitter that they replaced Lego Duplo. But their newer stuff is just bleh. If there's one positive thing about this line, it's the face molds they used. They are immensely accurate to the CGI series. Even the more babyish ones have really accurate faces. I also kind of appreciate the character selection they had. It's nothing vast or anything, but when they're all lined up, they look pretty cool. I can definitely see the appeal behind these guys. Up next is, and as much as this pains me to say because I have a soft spot for this line, is Thomas Adventures. These little guys hold a very special place in my heart because back in the day when I was an Instagram Thomas user and nothing more, this was before I started YouTube by the way, I collected literally all of the Thomas Adventures models, and I mean all of them. Until I stopped, but I still love them. However, looking back now, they were definitely a downgrade. Not from the 2014 Take and Play, hell no, but just generally they felt very cheap and some models were just extremely underwhelming. But despite this, I still kind of love them. For every Oliver they make, there's Alexi and Nia. Is this line good? Not really, but in my opinion it's not bad either. It's what I'd consider a mid toy line. There's a couple of goldies in there, but you've got to rummage through a lot of hot garbage to get to them. Up next we have minis. I'm not going to beat around the bush here, I'm not a minis guy. Some are cool, but for the most part I really don't care about this line. I really don't have a strong opinion on this line, it's just there. Now we get into the proper good ones. Next up is Brio. This line is absolutely fascinating to me, because from what I can tell it came around in a time where Wooden Railway was still a very hot product, and so I don't know if they were trying to ride off the success of Wooden Railway or trying to compete with it. Either way, they didn't succeed. The line lasted only 4 years, ending in the year 2000, soon after the release of Thomas and the Magic Railroad. Much like Mega Bloks, the faces on these models are stellar, and greatly resemble the TV series face masks. My main issue with this line is definitely the wheels, because when you can't see the wheels, they actually look really damn good. But then you see those Cruise and Lightning McQueen ass wheels and it all falls apart. Yeah, these greatly take away from the model's look. I understand this was Brio's thing, but they just look so jarring when you try to put them next to Wooden Railway models, which I'm sure many kids did back in the day. Also, a couple of models were just straight up bad. Diesel 10 definitely got the shortest end of the stick. Despite all their flaws, I still really like Brio, and I recommend you pick up a couple for yourself for those luxurious face sculpts. Up next is Lego Duplo. This line is just so good, man. Yes, they had a couple of misses here and there, but I can't help but adore these things. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, but my main association with these things stems from this one game on the Thomas Friends website back in the day. Yeah, remember the old Thomas website that was weirdly eerie sometimes? No, just me? Okay. But yeah, these guys were very stylized and once again had phenomenal face sculpts. I must say though, the character variety was pretty weak in this case. They made a grand total of 8 characters. Thomas, Percy, James, Gordon, Toby, Salty, Spencer and Stanley. Weirdly, no female characters. Something else to note is that these guys are very pricey nowadays, which just goes to show how much people still love them to this day. Maybe I'll pick one up for myself. Up next is probably my most controversial placement, Ertl. Yes, I know, but let me explain. So before I start complaining about Ertl, let me get one thing clear. I do not dislike Ertl. I don't think their models are bad per se, I just feel there's plenty of better toy lines out there. With that being said, I'm not a huge fan of Ertl. Some of their models just look ugly in my opinion, the scaling is absolutely terrible, the faces are very hit or miss, the wheels are genuinely pathetic, and the track system was laughable. And yet I still can't help but love them. I don't know man, I just can't bring myself to dislike this line. There's so much charm and character to these guys, and the amount of variety in characters is great. They made so many random props into toys and I love it. This crane from season 2, a taxi, a fire engine, D199 who wasn't even in the TV series, the Coldy Fell engines, fucking Falcon where they just changed the nameplate like the show. They had everything. My favourite era of Ertl though is without a doubt the early 2000s. Ertl's models of Murdoch, Arthur, Spencer, Fergus and Emily are nothing short of masterful, and are some of my favourite pieces of Thomas merchandise ever created. Next one up is Diagostini, probably the most obscure one on this list. These guys were part of a magazine where in each issue you would get a piece of track, an engine, a coach or a vehicle, and a magazine about that certain character. It sounds pretty generic on paper, but trust me, these things were amazing. Now, despite their extremely fragile paint and occasional duds, this line is surprisingly accurate to the TV series. Not always, but some of these guys look absolutely stunning. In particular, the main 7 engines. All of them have such unique expressions and vibrant paint and look phenomenal when side by side. Most of the time. Yeah, the scaling can sometimes be really off, which isn't an uncommon thing for these Thomas lines, but when you've got such good models, it's really distracting. Also, very random, but the fact they did Diesel 10 but none of the other Magic Railroad characters always confused me. Maybe it's a copyright issue, I'm not sure. Up next is probably another controversial one, Hornby. I have minimal experience with this line, but in terms of aesthetics, this one might be my favourite. I'm not sure if these are actually good runners or not, the modelers out there can probably tell me, but I simply love how these guys look. The faces are very off sometimes, but I think that's because the Hornby models are more based on the Railway series more than anything else. I do definitely prefer the original versions of these models with the darker paint, as the newer ones looked a bit too much like toys, if that makes sense. Hornby also had a couple of scaling issues here and there too, mainly being down to Toby being a literal giant for some reason. I also just found out that they cut ties with Thomas a couple years ago, so RIP Hornby Thomas, I guess. Up next is Diaper, a fantastic but flawed line. The Diaper engines, while extremely hard to get your hands on, are absolutely astonishing to look at, especially Hero, who is one of the best Thomas items of all time in my opinion. These guys have so many great qualities. They're damn near perfect paint, immensely accurate faces, moving side rods which I love to see, and on some of the engines they even have this underneath thing like in that one shot of Lost Treasure. Almost everything about these guys work. Almost everything. My main issue with this line is its pretty bad scaling. The main culprits of this are James, Annie and Clarabelle, who are way too big and look extremely jarring when put next to Thomas and Percy. Also, quick question for you guys, as I honestly can't figure this out. Is Diaper dead? Their last models were in 2018 and we've heard seemingly nothing since. I don't know if I missed some kind of confirmation, but if they are cancelled, that's really unfortunate, as I was patiently waiting for them to release Edward and Henry, but apparently not. Please let me know any info you have in the comments. Okay, so hear me out here. The next one up is Golden Bear. Just hear me out. I'm very aware that I'm going to get slack for putting Golden Bear above Hornby and Ertl, but I mean, hey, it's my opinion. Get over it. Golden Bear is just one of those ones that you can't help but love. Yes, they're extremely basic with their paint, wheels and sculpts, but guess what? I don't care. The faces on these guys absolutely carry the model. A lot like D'Agostini, the faces are so accurate. Some more than others, of course, but considering these are toys for literal infants, that's a very impressive feat. Now, you're probably wondering, Sean, what makes these better than Ertl and Hornby? Well, that, my friends, is because of the absolutely legendary toy line, the Golden Bear talking engines. These things are amazing. Each of these engines comes with moving eyes and completely unique phrases, with their voices provided by Michelangelos and some random woman from A Recent Lady.
I travel on the Magic Railroad.
I don't know what it is about these guys, but they're just so fascinating to me. You have no idea how much I want to collect all of the talking ones. Some of the voice lines the engines have are pretty weird though, I must say.
Faster! 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 Number 4 is the best. I'm friends with all the engines.
Why are you looking at me like that?
Like I said before, yes, they're simplistic and yes, they're for literal infants, but god damn it, these things are cool, okay? Just missing out on the top 5 is Capsule Play Rail, an adorable, wholesome little line. Much like Hornby, I have very little experience with this line and have only ever owned a couple of items. If we were to go off of what I thought of them a while back, they would be much lower on this list, but looking at all of the stuff they've done, it is absolutely astonishing. The character variety was a shock to me for sure. They had so many characters that I didn't even know were made. Who knew Capsule Play Rail made Hounds? I honestly don't have a lot to say about this line other than it's just really, really good. It's got the best character variety and the most locations of any Thomas toy line. Top marks. Kicking off the top 5, we have Bachman. Or Bachman, I don't know how to say it. Bachman is nothing short of a fantastic Thomas toy line. Despite its extortionate prices and awful engine faces, Bachman is easily the most accurate Thomas line out there. Now, much like Hornby, I don't know if the Bachman models are good runners or not, but from what I have learned from my extensive research of the Trains Are Fun YouTube channel, they're not too bad. To be completely honest, Bachman when it started was bad, and I still believe to this day that their weakest models are the main 3, and it's almost completely down to the faces. Why in God's name did they use these goofy ass promo images to base their face sculpts off? Was that all they were given? Did they feel that represented the characters best? I have so many questions. Now, despite all the smack I've been talking about Bachmann, the reason why I love these guys so much is because of the absolutely beautiful G-scale line, also known as God. I know some people aren't keen on these and I can understand why, but these guys have been my dream to own ever since I saw this video on YouTube back in 2011. I don't even care that they're based on the CGI series, I want them. Coming in at 4th place we have Bandai, and when I say Bandai I mean basically everything they've done. Nakayoshi, Pocket Fantasy, Departing Now, etc. Bandai has made so many things that I won't be able to cover them all in this one video. But for now, I'll share with you my favourite items in their catalogue. The Departing Now line as a whole is a goldmine. Every single model is amazing. The faces are wrong, but the way they functioned and how their side rods work is such a cool concept that I wish more companies would do. Their catalogue was also pretty vast. Along with the main cast, they also had the narrow gauge engines and some secondary characters too. Their main line Bandai text is something you're all probably aware of, whether that be because of their absolutely perfect Diesel 10, Splodge and Lady models, their goofy faces, or their connection to Nakayoshi, which is one of the more popular Bandai lines in recent years. Oh yeah, speaking of Nakayoshi, Nakayoshi is pretty good too. They're not the highest quality models or anything, and the scaling is once again cursed, but it's still a great line. Bandai is just a really good line. They've got some of the most charming Thomas lines out there, and deserve all the praise they're given. I highly recommend collecting at least one of their lines. Now we get into the top 3, featuring some special guests.
Hey guys, James is here, and I love me some Thomas Wooden Railway. Ever since childhood, I have been fascinated with this merchandise line, and I love almost everything about it. Thomas Wooden Railway isn't especially flashy like other brands of merchandise, but it doesn't try to be. The look and design of each engine is usually very simple, but still very accurate to the actual TV series model. When I was a kid, playing with Wooden Railway was always awesome, because unlike some other Thomas toys, there are certain things about it that made it more fun. They have magnets for easy coupling, you had to push them around which forced you to use your imagination, and it was really easy to make layouts. Now I know that Take-Along is very similar in many ways to Wooden Railway, but Take-Along never made express coaches. HA!
I f***ing love Take-Along. If I had to choose between a cure for AIDS and Take-Along, tell me which one has Murdoch. I fucking love Take-Along. It is my favorite Thomas range. One of my favorite toys of all time. Not exactly hard to beat the Golden Coin Maker. It gave me skin disease. I think the two best things about this range are the aesthetics and how it functions. See, unlike the previous Ertl range, Take-Along has magnet couplings, which don't break, aren't shit, don't break, and aren't shit! Now, while I do like the magnet couplings, they aren't exactly the strongest. If you're like me and a psychopath and buy a shit ton of rolling stock, this is crack for me. You can only use like 2 or 3 trucks at a time because the magnets can't handle how heavy the engines are. Get back to fucking work, Billy! But in terms of how the engines look, it's so good! They're stylized, but they still look like the ones from the show! Look, buddy! That's you! What really does it for me is the consistency. Unlike the Ertl range, they made a genuine effort to acknowledge that some engines are smaller than other engines, like Toby being smaller than Gordon. Oh. Well, it was like that in the show. Take-Along ran from 2002 up until 2009, where it was bought out by Fisher-Price and became the Take and Play range. These are basically the same with a few minor differences. The colors of the engines slightly changed, they got better faces, the lining became thinner, the wheels became stronger, they just became much better quality toys in general. And in Gordon's case, Jesus, he looks so good now! And then we get to 2012 and oh my god! The face is a literal 3D print of the ones from the show! That is so cool! And oh my god, they're re-releasing old characters like Coldy, Stepney, and ones we've never seen before like Class 40 and Big City Engine! What's gonna come next? Oh. So this is a midlife crisis! I am so glad I wasn't into Thomas at this time because... what is this? In a shining moment of genius from Mattel, they changed the smart 2-way magnets to 1-way magnets like the Wooden Railway range. And if their first hate crime wasn't enough, they made all the proportions shit! So my theory for this is that some engines didn't work on some sets, like Flynn, Bell, Hank. Basically the ones that Leo Video used. So the toy designers decided to f*** me and made all the longer multiple wheel engines into small maximum 6-wheel engines. Except Gator. I mean, the new characters don't look as bad. I don't mind how Timothy, Ryan, Gator, Marion, Samson... The joke is that I left. What's even worse about these changes is they're the same price as the amazing toys we got before! And then, the day came in 2016 when we all found out that the Take and Play range was officially ending. I wasn't massively into Thomas at this time, but I would check in every now and again to see what's going on. This genuinely upset me. The Take-Along range was my childhood toy, which then became the Take and Play range, and while I didn't get that many Take and Play engines, I still held them really close to my heart. But the question loomed in everyone's head. What was going to replace the Take and Play range? I'm not telling you, fuck you, figure it out yourself, I don't care. Just off the top of my head, some of my favorite Take-Alongs are Henry, James, Oliver, Duke, the Breakdown Crane, SpongeBob.
And so my personal favourite Thomas toy line is... Playrail. / Tommy. / Shit Toys. / Trackmaster. / okay, you get the point. Playrail is simply phenomenal. It's not the most complex line, but it without a doubt has the most going for it in my opinion. What I mean by that is that there's two ways of playing with these guys. Its main function, of course, is that it's motorized. And after putting a battery in the engine, it will follow the track you've laid down and will go around it as many times as you like. Not only this, but even without a battery in, you can still freewheel the engine wherever you want. Try and name one other company that lets you do both of those things. Exactly, you can't. Something that I also loved about this line is how many characters they made. My personal favourites being Murdoch, Lady, Gordon, Flipface James, Edward, Henry, Hector, Hero, Rebecca, Mighty Mac, Chocolate Crunch Percy, Cornwall Engines Thomas, Connor, Caitlin, Stephen. Yeah, you get the point. There's just something so satisfying about seeing a Playrail engine pulling a long train. Nothing beats it. Now, Playrail isn't without sin. There is of course the 2014 Trackmaster line, which is absolute garbage, but I choose to forget that exists despite the fact that there were a couple of good models here and there. Not only that, but there were some misses with Trackmaster, and more recently, Playrail has been dropping the ball hard. But overall, Tommy Playrail is an absolute beauty of a line. Its willingness to sacrifice playability for accuracy is beyond admirable in my opinion. I understand if you're not fond of this line, as it's definitely not for everybody, but I personally think that it is the best Thomas toy line of all time, and always will be.